Good morning, everyone. I'm so thrilled you could all be here today. I'm Leslie Hendrickson, a reporter at Mention Global, and I'm joined today by Gregory Malin, the CEO of Troon Pacific, Duan Tran, a partner at KAA Design, and Leni Popovici, the founding director and partner at KAA Studios. And today we're going to be talking about biophilic design. As we were just talking about in the previous session, wellness has been at the front of everyone's mind during the pandemic, but biophilic design has been found to support cognitive function, physical health, and psychological well-being. So we're going to talk about what it is and how to incorporate it into your homes. To our viewers, I just want to mention that you can drop any questions into the chat box to the right of your screen, and we'll try and get to them before the session ends. So to start off with, I'd just like to ask you all to please introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you do and where your work is most focused. And Leni, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Leni. I am one of 3 founding partners of KAA Studios. We are an architect's practice with an office in Los Angeles where we run all of our US projects, and one in London where I am joining you from today. And that's where we run all of our European projects. As a practice, we design buildings across a number of sectors, and they range from mixed-use buildings, offices, and hospitality projects, all the way to education and retail. But we have a particular passion and expertise in the residential sector, where we work at all ranges of the scale. And that includes designing bespoke one-off homes for private clients, as well as multifamily apartment buildings for developers, and all the way up to new neighborhoods for thousands of homes at master plan scale. So thank you. It's lovely to be here with you all today.
Greg, how about you?
Sure. So I'm Gregory Malin, and Troon Pacific, our company, we really create high-performance homes with a deep sense of responsibility, so to both sustainability as well as a relentless commitment to doing building health. So we're designers, developers, and investment partners, and in part a B Corporation, which is a for-benefit company. And we do that to put sort of social purpose on par with our other business goals, because part of our ethos is really, trying to create value through infrastructure, timeless design, innovation. But we realize that it's not just about me anymore. It's about we. So it's about not only about the health of our own homes and our bodies, but it's also about the health of the planet. So we try to accomplish that objective, and we see that into the foreseeable future.
Hi, and I'm Duan Tran. I'm a partner and principal at KAA Design. We're a 30-year-old plus firm here based in Los Angeles, California. Our work is predominantly here in Southern California, although we have a few select projects in around the United States and now internationally, which has been exciting for us. We focus primarily on high-end custom residential, lifestyle-based design. And our practice is fundamentally based on both architecture and landscape architecture. So given the conversation about wellness, it's a really great conversation about biophilia design and how we take a very site-specific approach to kind of nurturing that relationship. So looking forward to joining the rest of the panelists and engaging in the conversation.
Great. So my first question is really, what is biophilic design and biophilia, and what's the difference between that actual design concept and just, putting a plant on your desk? Duan, you want to start us off on that one?
Yeah, no. So, for us, biophilia design is about taking a thoughtful approach about embracing nature on day one. And, you're right. There's a lot of different levels and comfort for a lot of folks that are entering this arena. And it could be as simple as just having a window that opens out into a beautiful courtyard, or bringing a plant and putting on their desk. But for us, it's about truly prioritizing how we consider and bring in nature with our projects, creating wonderful, authentic indoor-outdoor environments that equally prioritize both of those agendas.
Great. Greg?
I would add to this and say that, the practice of biophilia and putting ourselves into healthier homes has been found to support cognitive health, physical health, psychological well-being. It improves mood, reduces stress levels, and I think that that's where it starts. For us, it's a broad spectrum of what it covers, because it's involving light and air and water and natural materials and landscape. But it is part of design. It's part of amenities. It's part of true intention. So it's based on this concept of this human affinity for nature, and in fact, there was a study that was done in Denmark that found that children under the age of 10, when they had greater access to green space, had a 55% less risk of mental disorder in adulthood. So our strategies are to blur the boundary between indoor and outdoor. And now oftentimes that's like trying to bring the indoor out. We really focus on abundant daylight, like creative ways to capture and distribute natural light through a house. Ventilation and airflow, which is near and dear to, I think, all of our hearts at this stage. And then a seamless connection, between that indoor and outdoor, adding water and fire features, and then natural textured materials into the design we incorporate.
I guess it's my turn. Yeah, so I think I would echo what Gregory and Duan have said. Biophilia as a term and as a topic, it is there's a wealth of information these days, and it ranges in credibility. So in our practice, we want to start with an understanding of how biophilia as a term is used and what it really means in design. So as Gregory mentioned, it's a term that originates in psychology in the 60s and the 70s. It was originally meant to talk about affinity towards nature, towards living organisms. And as it crossed over into the design industry these days, it now can mean something quite straightforward to some people, like add indoor plants and suddenly you have a biophilic design. But ultimately, really, biophilic design, I think, encompasses a really wide variety of methods by which we want to design spaces that really integrate nature into our environments and our buildings. So at CAP, we would look at several big categories. Access to daylight, as my colleague said, is a really big topic. There's also, though, texture and tactility, what all the surfaces that you touch and you see are made of. It's your landscape, your weather, your climate, your location, how you position and orient your building to sit comfortably in nature. And also plants and animals, so not just existing within a garden or having plants for human well-being, but also providing really various ecosystems to actually support and enrich local wildlife, particularly in urban environments. So really for us, biophilic design, I think, is almost like an ecosystem of tools for design.
Interesting, thank you. So have you all seen an uptick in interest in this kind of design over the pandemic? And how have you seen that, and why do you think it is? Gregory, why don't we start with you on this one?
Well, it's kind of interesting. Absolutely. It was sort of funny. It was actually a Wall Street Journal reporter that approached me maybe 7 or 8, maybe 9 years ago. And I was speaking about air quality and air changes. And she looked very blank, and she was later, now this is today or recently, she looks at me and she says, I thought you were crazy. You were talking about air changes and ventilation and filtration. And today I can't have a conversation without it. I was at a global real estate conference, and this was like it was 9 tri-state associations of realty, and they were asking questions from the realtors, and the questions that came out of the audience were all focused on either health, wellness, or sustainability, and that was something in my lifetime I've never seen. So I think the conversation about healthy buildings is more important than it's ever been. And I think it's, today your home is your office. Sometimes it's your school, it's your gym at times. And, then you think, well, this is the air we breathe. This is the water we drink. This is our mental health. It just all matters. So I think it's more important than it's ever been.
Great. Have you all found the same, Leni and Duan?
Yeah, absolutely. Echoing what Greg said again. I think when everyone's attention is drawn so sharply to their health and well-being, and all of our daily rhythms were like so dramatically disrupted, it's very natural for all of us to start observing and questioning our surroundings and to demand more of them. So I think we've all, regardless of whether you are a designer or an architect as a professional occupation, every single one of us has become designers because we've had to rethink our homes. And as Greg said there, you expected to do everything for you, to provide, fulfill your work needs, provide space for physical health and exercise, to relax you, but also to stimulate you. We've asked our house or our apartment to do everything for us. And our escape from the monotony of the last 18 months has been outside, really, in nature, in wilderness, if you live rurally, or your local park, or even if you have one tree on your street. It's been our release. So it's very natural for us all to be very preoccupied with how our homes are serving us, and to try and connect as much as possible to the outdoors, when nature and the outdoors have really been our only safety net recently.
Right.
I would even further to add to both my colleagues, it's the thing that we're realizing a lot in terms of the conversations we're having with clients is that it's no longer a luxury decision. Back in years past, it would be, well, I wish we could afford to do that, or maybe one day we'll do that. But now it's a human right, and people's desire to connect to nature. And, given the circumstances of COVID and the realities of ensuring that we're developing environments that are not only healthy in terms of physical, but also mental health people are demanding that much more upfront. And so we're seeing a slight shift in terms of it being seen as a luxury trend, but more just a fundamental human rights trend, which is really great for all the work that we're doing. So.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I also wanted to ask you all, is a biophilic home necessarily a sustainable one? Do those things always go together or not so much? Duan, do you want to start off on that one?
Yeah, this is a tricky one. I had to think about this one a little bit, and my sense is it's so hard to disassociate the two. I think fundamentally a biophilic home has to be sustainable because it's one that's sympathetic to the environment. It truly embraces what the environment gives us and brings the indoor and outdoor in, and as Greg said, brings the indoors outdoors sometimes, which is a wonderful idea. But I think in order for us to truly create a sustainable home, it does need to be so integrated to the sustainable aspects of a lot of the agendas that are within the design world right now. So
interesting. Leni, I wanted to ask you. You're working in both California and in London. So what are the differences between the wellness trends in both those different places?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I think in order to get a little bit closer to answering it, I want to give a bit of background about the UK. So one of the really big things that influences design and buildings and the whole construction industry in the UK in the 40s, the introduction of the Green Belt, which is a ring around the city that controls the urban sprawl of London. It's meant that over time, land became more and more expensive, and the city had to densify significantly in order to be able to continue growing. And now that's meant that we're in a situation where house prices are so high, partly because the cost of the land is now a disproportionate amount of the overall cost of building a house. So if in the 50s it used to be 25% of the cost was the land, now it's almost 70%. So that means that housing is really expensive and it's often very small, and that we work really hard as designers and as homeowners and tenants to make sure that every single square inch counts. And I think that's a really interesting contrast to LA, because besides the fantastic climate that you're all blessed to have in California, LA's benefited from a generous amount of land. And it's a city that has spread in its basin, and reached the confines of the ocean in the Santa Monica Mountains and St. Gabriel's. And it's now very common still in the middle of the most urban parts of the city to find generous plots of land that have just one-story bungalow on it, which for us in the UK is unthinkable. So coming to wellness and biophilia, we find that we bring a lot of know-how from the UK about how to densify and urbanize while keeping, a very high quality of life and feeling of well-being in the home. So, for example, in Culver City, we recently completed 4 townhomes on a plot that used to have just one bungalow. And what essentially that means is you're providing 8 times the amount of square footage and enabling 4 families to live in the city when that space was just for 1 family before. But in order to do that successfully and to make habitable homes, you've got to really work hard and design with great skill and consideration towards things that we were talking about: access to outdoor space, lighting, privacy, material choices, all of these things to make living in a dense city even more covetable than perhaps a bungalow on its own piece of land.
That's great. Very interesting. And Duan, I also wanted to ask you how you incorporate the landscape design into your overall concept for a high-end home. You were talking a little bit about bringing the outdoors in and the indoors out. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. Our approach is fundamentally driven by the idea that we prioritize landscape exterior spaces equally as to indoor spaces. And much like what Leni was mentioning about, even though here in Los Angeles and Southern California, we're blessed with a little bit more land and there's a little bit more elbow room, the reality is that the real estate value out here is significant. And so when clients are purchasing a postage stamp size lot or maybe a couple acres, they're still looking to maximize every last inch of that. And so we've been empowered on many of our projects to not only think about the house, but also what is the design of the property. And we take pride in kind of approaching our work where we're designing property line to property lining, and to think about how these indoor and outdoor spaces truly weave together. So as if it's one overall floor plan, indoor and outdoor versus an indoor plan. And then let's plant around it and figure out what the residual outdoor spaces are. So that type of layering and that type of approach has really allowed for at least a lot of our work and many other architects that are working here in Southern California, I'm sure Leni's as well, to kind of take a very democratic approach to how we create maximum value for the property. Because again, just finding that connection and ensuring that we're not leaving residual space is critically important to a lot of our work.
Right, got it. Gregory, you were talking a little bit about materials earlier, and I wanted to get more into that idea. What kinds of materials do you think work best for biophilic homes?
Yeah, there's the obvious where you're talking about natural materials, textured materials like wood, stone. What is less obvious, I would say, is take glass, for example. So, glass works in the obvious, which is, it's a visual connection to the exterior, to your windows, it can be your doors, and we want to see that happen. But it's how you can incorporate light into a home. So it's also skylights. It's also glass stairs, maybe. So we'll sometimes have, glass stairs kind of going up and down, 3 or 4 stories. And then we'll put a skylight above it that maybe is operable to allow for fresh air. And then that allows for natural air movement because heat tends to rise and the nice colder air from your lower floors work your way into the rest of the home. But it creates a circulation, it creates a connection in that way. Sometimes we're incorporating water into our homes. So we have a home we're working on right now, and that home is, or it's completed, that it has this water feature inside, and you have this sound of water trickling, and it really decompresses you when you think about it. And then there's patterns. We think about it from the patterns of the materials we use. So this could be like lighting fixtures that have like an essence of coral, or it's a texture that's hand chiseled wood or stone on a wall. It could be naturally occurring patterns. Even the glass stairs I mentioned earlier is poured in a mold, and it created a leaf-like natural occurrence in the way that it was just made. And then it works its way into cabinetry and, where you can add leather or wood or other things that are tactile and inviting. So those are the ways we do it.
Amazing. It sounds like there's a real range of things that you can do to incorporate this biophilic design into your home. I also wanted to talk a little bit about air quality. We've touched on that. Obviously, that's been a huge element of the pandemic, and people have been talking about it much more over the last 18 months probably than they ever did before. Have you found that? And what are you doing now to promote good air and not having pathogens or other germs in the air?
So we're taking air very seriously. You realize like the average American spends 90% of their time indoors. You have the EPA saying indoor air pollution is one of the top 5 environmental risks to public health. So you have to deal with it. So we start first with, we put an air barrier below all of the homes that we build, and we're actively ventilating it above the home. So we're trying to help prevent something happening in urban environments from permeating into your home. But we're also looking at the air in the home, and we use usually an HRV, because we want to change the air a minimum of 8 times a day, and we like to see it maybe 12. And to do that, you don't want to lose energy of heating or cooling. So it's a heat exchanger, allows the air to be brought to the same temperature. So it's constantly moving at a very low speed, and it's constantly changing. But then you can think about, where do you take the air out of? So we'll take air out of trash enclosures, but even under a kitchen sink where you store chemicals. And then for pathogens and smoke, which is now near and dear to what happens here in California, we want to get those small 2.5 PM particles out of the air. And to do that, we're actually using a product which is bipolar ionization. We're using Atmos Air, and that has, in the end, is the idea is that it's attracting these particles together, so they're collected by our MERV 13 filters, where it ends up recirculating constantly and changing, but catching those could catch also viruses like COVID. So the idea is to help improve the way that we have air moving through our homes, in addition to natural ventilation.
Great. Leni or Duan, do you have anything to add to that?
I would say we're also seeing, besides the general principles of design, we're seeing a lot of consumer-ready devices, just in daily life, not even in professional life, just as a consumer and a home user. Devices that can purify, humidify, dehumidify, or otherwise control the air in your home. And as we were just listening to at the previous panel, a lot of them are now smart and connected and can make a real big difference in buildings that perhaps were not designed with air quality in mind from the start, or did not have access, in 10 years ago when they were built, to all of the information that we have now. So you can use a lot of devices that plug and play to make a difference, even if you have an older property.
Yeah, and for us, just to add to especially what Gregory was mentioning, we think a lot about trying to find ways to create passive natural ventilation. We're blessed here in Southern California to be able to live indoors, outdoors, and be able to have our doors and windows open most of the time. But in many ways, the way that homes are designed out here, it doesn't really even leverage that. So we try to find strategic techniques with clear stories or with other ventilation techniques to allow for air to naturally move through the house, to also create a little bit more of a sustainable environment within those spaces.
Very cool. So we have a question from our audience, an audience member, which is, how do you do biophilic design in an apartment or a condo setting, somewhere where there's a dense urban environment, which we've talked a little bit about? And is it possible to back into it with a home that's already built? Leni, you were just alluding to that a bit. Do you want to say a little more?
Yeah, I think it's different, when as a tenant, perhaps you're maybe even renting or you own a small apartment in a really urban setting in a building that's been designed by others and maybe even a while ago. And I think biophilic design can be all of the things that we've talked about recently, but it can also be really simple things. It's about making your home feel good to you. So actually, I would just encourage taking something like 20 minutes and walk around your apartment. Just pay really close attention to the room that you're in and how it makes you feel, and see if there's something as you're walking, if there's a space that particularly resonates with you and makes you feel really good. Maybe it's a particular seat in your home, or it's a corner, or it's your bookshelf, or it's a light. We all have this really very intuitive sense of well-being. And I think tuning into what that makes you feel like and what it means to you, to find out why, can really surprise you. So if you can hone in on something that is already going very well in your home, perhaps you can propagate that to the rest of the spaces.
Duan or Gregory?
Oh, sure. I mean, I would add to that, playing with textures. I think that that's an easy way to kind of incorporate nature into your lives. Finding natural materials in furniture. We're big believers in art. Adding a water feature, incorporating landscape into your interiors, right, whether it's plants or flowers, and thinking about the organic patterns you could even do on wallpaper or do within the colors or choices you use that you're living with. So that's how I think I would try to take it.
Yeah, and I agree with my colleagues. I think it doesn't have to be heavy-handed. Every space, whether or not you're in an apartment or you're blessed to live on a significant estate property, has the better parts and the worst parts. And I love what Leni was just even mentioning, just taking the time to walk through your apartment and then finding where your happy place is. And it could be as simple as that corner that has the beautiful morning light and it's the perfect place to have coffee, and that's where you want to set up your desk. Or just like what Gregory mentioned, it's about finding the colors that make you happy and painting your bedroom or that living space that color, so that the mood of that space really levitate or elevates your human spirit. So there's a lot of small things that I think we can all do to enhance our living situations that don't necessarily require, again, a heavy-handed design response.
I'll add to what you were just saying. I heard at another conference this architect talk about this concept of nudge design, which was this idea of nudging you to use exterior. So if you have a townhome or apartment, or you are doing a remodel, coming up with amenities and ideas that help bring you into nature is another way to kind of incorporate nature into your livelihood.
Amazing. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. We could, of course, continue to talk for probably the rest of the day, but I appreciate you all being here. This has been a great discussion. Thanks so much for being here.